That's an excellent entry point to manage. Actually, we're using biosecurity as the entry point. Anything coming in, whether it's jerry cans or food.
Your attention, please. I think now it's time to go into the plenary session. If group number 1, if you could please take the floor and all right. Your attention, please, everybody. If you could just break the conversations and turn your attention to table number 1 for unsolicited donations, points and recommendations. Thank you.
Go through it and tell him to choose 2. But are we going to go through the problem? You want to understand?
Okay, good afternoon. I'll firstly go through some of the problems that we discussed, especially our sub-theme is unsolicited donations. We have the problems that we have identified inappropriate items. When we talk about inappropriate items, we include expired items or drugs, items that are not useful in the Vanuatu context. We also include quality of non-standard items, especially tabs and pens. We have issues where, since we have limited quantity of standard items and the others, we have a different quality or quantity of the tarpaulin. So that we also have complaints about that. We have extra time to evaluate or sort out items and also items that require additional support or parts that needs repair. Those are some of the problems that we identified with regards to unsolicited donations. Some of the recommendations that we put, I'll just read out as we've stated in the paper. We need to establish list of items that are useful during during non-disaster times. This will be like a wish list that we have, especially for necessity items that the country needs. So this list will be somehow put up. So once we come to the disaster time, we already know these are the items or the necessity items that we want for recovery or for the response. We also need to set up an office or a person that will deal with specific or the speciality of unsolicited items. Also, this particular person at the office will
the good answer there. For medical supplies, like we were coordinating all this and solicited goods. We have difficulties with medicals because we are not specialists in this type of medical supplies. So whenever this request coming in, we'll just indicate that they will continue to send us. So I have to contact Firan, Tofo, and I even give the link to them. I give the contact number to them, I mean contact points. But it's up to those donors. They are giving us those relief supplies. I don't know how they liaise with Viran Tofo. But at the end of the day, we saw some of this relief coming in with containers, so we just have to pick it up and drop it. It was very challenging for us.
So through customs, they were still accepting the goods, even though it wasn't.
Yes, this touches on a very serious issue on medical supplies and medical equipment and instruments that were supplied. Many times we already aware that the things are already here, and that's very difficult for us to send it back. So that is the issue. Every time we receive information that you have some medical supplies, but it's already here. If it was still overseas, we would have stopped it. That this is not in line with our assets policy, medical policy, medicine policy, essential drug list, which we only have certain type of drugs to be used in Vanuatu, but not any kind of, not other drugs that are not listed on the Vanuatu essential drug list. So that's the problem. Every time they tell us it's already here in Vanuatu. So that's the problem. We don't know how this has been, the donations have been coming.
Thank you. Hold on.
Sorry, just can we feed back to that? Hello?
Yes. Object, just a minute. Yes?
Can we feed back to that comment, just on the discussion around the table?
Sure, go ahead.
Part of the legislation review that we talked about, there were different levels of it. And one of the levels was a review of customs policy under the emergency declaration. So under the emergency declaration, the way customs and customs clearance is handled should be changed. I think the ports, especially the two international ports, should be managed much stronger. And this is the recommendation from the group. And we should have a bill of loading before anything reaches the wharf. And the bill of loading should be cleared by the appropriate authority. So if it reaches the wharf, the ship captain is in charge of it until it's cleared by the authorities. So this is one of the recommendations that's coming out of this group as part of a whole bunch of recommendations around legislation review.
Can I just quickly jump in? The short answer to that was yes. During the response we got from the Ministry of Health, your criteria for medicines, for standardized equipments, we gave that to the logistics cluster and they posted it on the website. So that was available for donors because we were getting requests from donors about the standards of the medicines that are required, and we had a really comprehensive list from the Ministry of Health, so that made everything much easier.
Thank you. Wojciech? Can somebody give a... Thank you.
I think in when it comes to the health cluster, the criteria were, as was explained, very clearly defined and made available to donors. And when there was any ambiguity, not only from the health clusters, but also from WASH or shelter clusters and DMO, as to what assistance is prioritized by the government, we would refer that back to that cluster. But by and large, sort of the criteria for internationals donations were defined by cluster leads, which is government. Thank you.
Thank you. Shall we move our attention to table number 2 and the international assistance? Do you have a microphone?
I think that our table, we did a little bit of rewriting the exam question, slightly due to who is in the group. So the questions that we were given really focused very strongly on the national government level, but we were a group of people from the international community and from the provincial and the CDC level. So we took a slightly different take on the question. I think part of the reason that we were able to do that was that broadly things didn't go too badly wrong in this area of how well regulated was the engagement of the international community into Vanuatu. It certainly wasn't a Haiti-style situation. We did talk about the fact that at the community level, there was a feeling that there were too many assessments and different groups and different NGOs coming in, that it was fairly uncoordinated and that it often bypassed the provincial government. And that was certainly not ideal, caused some confusion and a little bit of frustration. Generally, I think that the people of Vanuatu are extremely polite and basically just put up with it. And it came through very strongly that the provincial systems do exist. There are systems that could be used for getting funding down to the provincial level, for getting logistics down to the provincial level, and also for better coordinating or having, you know, letters of introduction or clearances for people coming in as well, and that those systems that exist should be utilised and strengthened, and that perhaps where they are systems that are not terribly strong, that we could use what happened during the emergency to actually advocate for those systems to be strengthened. So there is a role for a strong coordinated central government, but that should not be at the expense of the ability of the provinces and the communities to govern their own communities.
Thank you. Is there any questions or any comments, points, additional? So let's move to deployment of military assets. That was table number 4, I think, or number 3. Deployment of military assets.
Okay, so we had 3 questions that we had to answer, and one was that how do we reach more and better? We went about talking about maybe setting up operation centers in key locations. For example, Santo for the operations up north, and maybe Efade for the operations down south. And because of the remoteness of most of the communities, also looking at the question of whether it's better to be in ships rather than planes or helicopters. So that was a question that we put back. We talked about coordination and information sharing with other government agencies like the police force, the maritime, and the VMF to assist with logistics. And this came about mainly planning prior to the onset of a cyclone or just after a cyclone, talking to those key agencies about helping out in logistics as first responders while we wait for the big assets. But on the question of reaching more and better, I think the general consensus was that there just needed to be more coordination and information sharing within the government realms here before we get into the bigger stuff that's coming in. The other question was around coordination and access to the military assets themselves. I think all of us witnessed the chaos that happened in the first week or so when there was no civil-military coordination down at NDMO. We didn't know when the military assets were leaving, what was here, and there was a lot of chaos trying to get things out from Vila. So while the big loads that were coming in from Australia, so the heavy lift from Australia, from Noumea, That was all good because it was coming from one organized logistics area to a main port. But then from getting it from the main port to the areas that really needed them was where the coordination fell down. And it was only strengthened when we had the civil military coordinator in there. And it's important to note here that military assets, unlike civil assets, have very strict guidelines on how to use these assets. And these, one of the recommendations from the group was that these guidelines had to be relayed back to the government and the logistics cell so that they knew, so that when the NGOs and other partners, all the civilian partners came in, you could tell them that, you know, we've got these planes, or we've got these helicopters, but these are the guidelines that we need to use. The flexibility is not always there. When they say they leave at 8, they leave at 8. They don't leave at 10 past 8. So when they say that you need your cargo there, so I guess the access to the assets can be seen that it's very hard, but it's because of the nature in which military assets worldwide are used, and there's very strict guidelines on how those are used. So I guess the recommendation here is that the civil military coordination has to be an integral part of the logistics cell, the logistics cluster, and that's got to be enhanced, and it's got to be sitting here in NDMO, and it has to be one of the functioning areas of any response. The last one we had, the question was around donor mandates versus national needs. Most of us around here thought that it went hand in hand, but then again, there's a bit of conflict. But I guess from a government of Vanuatu perspective, and we all thought that the national needs were stated quite clearly right after the cyclone, what the exact needs were. And most of the donors responded to that. And that was seen by the amount of stuff that was coming in straight after the initial week or so after the cyclone. And as far as donor mandates, I think the Foreign Affairs Departments of all the countries that, the main donors that are in Vanuatu, they played a key role in engaging their military. So that it took that away from government of Vanuatu having to engage the military one-on-one. So that was a key area to highlight. I guess on other points that were raised was that the government needs to have a clear mandate on how and when it wants to engage military assets in disaster response. At the end of the day, you're the one that's asking for these assets to come in, so we need to tell them what it is that we need, and they can respond to that. And like anything, any incoming foreign assistance, civil or military, need to follow and conform with host countries' diplomatic channels and all the things and the procedures that are set in place. Yeah, that was it. Thanks.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comments? Additional points? Thank you very much. Now, about preparedness and prepositioning, group number 4.
So our group generally said that the prepositioning did work well, especially in light of the scenario that we couldn't get anything else into the country for the first few weeks. So all we had to survive on was our prepositioned stock. But there were definitely challenges with that. The probably most noted one was that even though a lot of the agencies have warehouses in different provinces, they still needed authorization from the head office, which would be in Port Vila. And with the communication lines being down, this meant that none of the provincial areas could actually make use of the warehouse stock. There was also some issues about the different quantities and probably quality of prepositioned stock that was distributed, which obviously could lead and cause to the different communities getting upset that, you know, someone received a tarpaulin with rope and another one didn't, and things like that. Under the preparedness activities, we had some good feedback from our Fiji and Solomon Island colleagues here. Things that were discussed were links to the donors about replenishing pre-positioned stock, but that is not driven through the agencies, it's actually driven through the NDMO. And doing that enables the provincial areas to be allowed to be authorized to take over the stock, because if they using it, they have to make sure that the funding's there to replenish it. Whereas currently the relationships are between the NGOs and the donors. There was discussion about CDCs actually having pre-positioned certain types of tool sets. Again, they were the ones who needed to start repairing really early on, so that some things could be pre-positioned at a CDC level. From this morning session, needing to get better feedback from communities about what actually needs to be pre-positioned. I know quite a few of the NGOs have had discussions about their experiences across the Pacific, which has created certain standard kits, but I'm not sure how many of that's been actually checked with communities to make sure that it's that is correct. Kit standardization. So I know the WASH cluster has had discussions around what should go into standard kits. I'm not sure. I think the shelter cluster is starting to do that. And again, this needs to be done now, because a lot of NGOs, as they buying and pre-positioning, need to, you know, that could be a 3 or 5 year cycle. So they need to know that very early on. And then also describing standard operating procedures around distribution, quantities distributed and stuff like that, to avoid conflicts in the community. That the pre-positioned stock matches up with the provincial disaster centers disaster action plans, and that there are clear MOUs between the government departments, like for instance, NDMO with the Public Works Department, to get access to assets like graders and heavy duty equipment to move things around, to clear access roads and all that kind of stuff. And then the question around what should be pre-positioned and where. Generally, the discussion went round at a PDC level. There needs to be, the stock needs to be pre-positioned and have the authority somehow to actually make use of it, especially in light of our communication issues. Things over and above the NFIs that we pre-positioned, things like search and rescue equipment, generators, pumps, chainsaws, that sort of thing. We need to revise the number of households that a lot of the NGOs are basing their ordering for pre-positioned stocks, because the figures we're using were way lower than the actual reality. MOUs with private businesses, you know, the Bon Marchés of the world, Wilcos of the world, to say that at any one time they need to have enough food or chainsaws or whatever in stock, so that at time of emergency the government can actually give directive as to getting hold of them and utilize them at a government directed priority. And that included things like food, fuel, water containers, tarpaulins, and toolkits. I think that was about it.
Thank you very much. Any questions or comment? Let's move to our last point, logistics and coordination. Table number 5, please.
Sorry, everyone speak English. Me, but me speak Bishlama. Mi vla question mi vla oli aske mi wanem na role blo NDMO mo logistics cluster. All role oli clear or no? And wanem na expectations blo clusters. And how now you miss strengthening logistics lo Vanuatu. So group meeting things role blo NDMO and role blo logistics cluster at the moment, I mean, no really clear. So group of them, lo places all roles there need lo clearly defined. In terms of observation, if I make one observations, for example, say all ship will come, will go, will organized well, or low side, low view, low, or get a low wash cluster, only been giving one thing, say, some low time, yeah, sometime, me, got confusion, them little bit, low time, low discipline. Low another view is that logistics, only should not provide him some group meeting thing. Logistics cluster, I mean, role play, me no, provide him transport or all other awesome logistics, moving all goods from Port Villa to all affected locations. Really, I should look coordinate him how all assets only brought in information, I mean, flow from all different members below logistics cluster, and then ME flow call NDMO. So group been thinking lo place now reporting line lo that time ME no really clear, so you need blow you may work blow make me clear lo future. In terms of all challenges, low side low logistics, sometimes instructions are not really clear. You got confusion between when I'm NDMO and Staptalem, when I'm logistics cluster lo time been sa time lo doing. For example, one example, I timing issue low side low what time all plane all ships only leave, plane only fly. For example, some locations you need to police presence or military presence for ensuring safety and security, side movement of goods and assets.
Thank you very much.
No, you didn't finish it. Sorry.
I apologize.
We've lost the time flipping page over. Thank you. We've lost group eating things. Low side blow any recovery, role blow cluster, logistics cluster, important. Blow me system NDMO. So all issues we've identify, maybe list mo gata. So how now you must strengthen logistics inside lo Vanuatu. I should get all clear roles and types of all processes, standards of operations between where only should be clearly identified, and then class time is our when role straight now is play. One thing come out say lo place you must identify all key people and so that you must keep up to date all information. One thing say information lo side lo context you got one thing say you should got one database pre and post disaster where we stop where easy blow tap into information. Even got discussion lo side blow role blow NDMO whether even got thinking say whether you got one unit inside the NDMO or no. This was I think one member of the group me clearem say lo pleasure role blow or responsibility blow logistics me one big flat responsibility and that NDMO but him need him help lo pleasure. You got one thing too been come out say maybe low time lo disaster role blow logistics sabe be handled by one independent body. Example privatizing logistics or NDMO or government. You got some MOU between logistics company blow only handling or managing logistics during disaster. One other something, some only experiencing red tape or during emergency, for example, one sick person where we should fly Kamlo MI, Kamlo Villa, but Okatalo Health say plane in out low until Okatalo NDMO only give him green light, low plane out. So him too, me taking time, make him say patient here, he been sick 2 months, me lose some life plan. In terms of law, again, logistics, law, how law you may arrange him during disaster. You got one suggestion, law time been come out, say maybe you may have got one legislative mandate where he may have appoint during emergency time or disaster time, government may appoint him logistics agency, probably. For example, on a ship or airplane, blowly work with them government, blow moving assets, goods, more people during emergency. Me continue yet, NDMO blow me developing more strategic policy direction. And so sharing with them local country or international agencies will come. Also maybe setting some direction mo policy law katalo military time only coming from Mimi Haram finish say all coming with them strict guidelines well all no well is of follow but maybe government set them some direction the place where all work with them government blow benefiting everyone blow moving goods and people where Mr. assisting government during emergency. One other thing come out, say Mr. building skills, more knowledge, all agencies will deal with them in a disaster situation. Example, business continuity plans, low time to disaster, more recovery plans. Okay. One last but not least point, logistics will assist him telecom companies, lowly assessing damage and move assets and equipment, low you go severely damaged infrastructure, low restoring communications, and also blow restoring information flow. So point this after TCPM, something may be overlooked. So in this day and age, you may need very much communications. So we should include him inside cyber planning, blow restoring telecoms infrastructure. I think thank you, Thomas.
Thank you very much. Is there any comments, any questions coming from the audience? Yes, if you could.
Just one comment around the discussion for the logistics almost being outsourced or privatized. experience that we had was that in the early days, there was just so much logistics happening. You couldn't get hold of boat assets. It was confusing to figure out which boat was going when, all these kind of things. But later on in the response, the logistics teams actually almost set up like bus routes. You know, from this wharf, this boat's always going to go to Tana. Every 3 days, it will be back and it will go and it will come and it will go. And this boat from this wharf is going up to Epi, and every 4 days it will be back and pick up stuff. So NGOs knew that all they had to do was get their stuff to that wharf, and if it didn't make it on that trip, 4 days later we'll make it on the next trip. And that made the logistics so much easier for us to actually move things around. The thing also is give government one good fellow opportunity to understand exactly what is moving around the country, because centralized places that they can actually just have 1 or 2 people monitoring. Okay, what did we load onto the ship that went to Tana? What did we load that went to the Epi? So I think is if you sort of let someone else manage that, the government will actually lose a lot of valuable information about what's actually moving around the country at the time of a response.
Yes, thank you very much. I apologize, I'm just going to respond to this just for a second. What was discussed was the outsourcing of logistics within NDMO. What you're talking about is information sharing, which falls under the mandate and the responsibility of the logistics cluster. So there is a clear differentiation to be made here between those two functions. The logistics within NDMO is normally designed to deal with the bits of logistics that NDMO has to deal with. On this operation, they have been tasked with more than what they are supposed to do, what they are designed to be doing. And that fell under the logistics cluster. And these were activities of transport and dealing with an operational side that normally the logistics cluster does not deal with. But what you're talking about is information sharing. Glad to hear it worked, and it is supposed to be done by the logistics cluster. That's all I wanted to mention. Yes, madam? You were going to talk.
No, me just want to respond no more. Lo tingtingnya, emi come out, digiblo climate change, emi express them say lo that time, emi ibin hard lo NDMO plo mi management hemia so type only need him assistance lo pressure. I got issue lo capacity. Thank you.
Thank you. Wojciech?
I just want to quickly talk about one theme of civil-military coordination that came up in a number of groups. Just to put things in perspective, the early days of TCPAM response was the largest military operation in this part of the world since Second World War. And the pressure that this put on NDMO and the logistic class were tremendous. However, the teams worked tirelessly to find solution and good mechanisms to resolve any problems. One of the recommendations was to build capacity of civil-military coordination on the inside of NDMO, and I wholeheartedly agree with that. However, I also feel that the burden of the civil-military coordination is also on the France partners. Having access to France partners in this part of the world is one of the logistical opportunities. Few regions like that have access to 3 different countries and their military assets that are assisting humanitarian action. So we will continue to build on these relationships and to request military assets during the time of need. I think the lessons learned, not only for Vanuatu, but for other Pacific countries, is that sort of that civil-military aspect needs to be refined on both sides, on the sides of NDMO's in the Pacific, but also by the France partners as well. So they're coming with personnel who understand the context and who can engage with NDMOs and local context more effectively. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or point or comment? Yes, Anthony.
Thank you. Probably my comment is just going to cause more confusion. What I'm trying to bring up here is there needs to be an understanding between two particular aspects. One is the aspect of incident management, where you also have a logistics function, and the aspect of the logistics cluster. And in this particular event of TCPAM, the NEOC and its logistics function and the logistics cluster was an interesting way of seeing how things worked and did not work. My background is incident management or emergency management, and seeing how this plays between a humanitarian sector activity, which is the logistics cluster, as well as an incident management activity, which is the logistics function. Both have their merits. There are some very interesting discussions coming here about privatizing the logistics, whether that's the function of the NDMO. And it's probably a lot of good lessons have been learned from TCPAM that we can all walk away with, especially in logistics. It's not as simple as it looks on paper. And from looking at the civil military side of things, while it was quite stressful, it was also a steep learning curve for a lot of us, even for those of us who are deployed to other Pacific Island countries, getting to see some of the mechanisms and some of the, you could say, the paper trail that was trying to be implemented during the operation, I think is a credit to the whole team that was involved, trying to put process into chaos, which I think we can actually sit back and look back now and say, okay, some of this actually did work. It was painful for some when they walked in having to fill in these forms that required 48 hours notice and all these different calculations. But I think in hindsight now, having that experience, in the next event, we are a lot more, let's say, aware of what we need to have available for logistics in the next category 5 that comes in the next 24 months. So cross your fingers, it doesn't happen, touch wood, and touch everything else. So with that, I think logistics, though there have been a lot of lessons learned from it, I think it was probably one of the biggest areas we all learned from. Thank you.
Thank you very much. That will be our conclusion. On the behalf of NDMO Logistics, Vinao and myself would like to thank you very much for your contributions, and we wish you a very good day.